This lesson discusses visual aids to navigation for RYA Coastal Skipper and Yachtmaster students. IALA is the International Association of Marine Aids to Navigation and Lighthouse Authorities. It is a non-profit, non-governmental international technical association. Established in 1957, it gathers marine aids to navigation authorities, manufacturers and consultants from all parts of the world and offers them the opportunity to compare their experiences and achievements. IALA's aim is to harmonize aids to navigation worldwide and to ensure that the movements of vessels are safe, expeditious, cost-effective and harmless to the environment. Despite many international conferences in the 20th century, the world has never agreed on a single system of buoyage. So we're left with two slightly different systems, IALA A and IALA B. Basically, B is for the Americas, including the Caribbean, and a few countries which suffered a big US influence after World War II, notably Japan, Korea, and the Philippines. Everywhere else is in IALA A. The only difference between IALA A and IALA B is that whereas in the A region so-called lateral buoys are coloured red for port and green for starboard, in the B region it's the other way around. So when you are navigating in the direction of buoyage into a harbour or estuary, in the IALA A region you keep red can-shaped buoys to port and green conical buoys to starboard. In the IALA B region it's the other way around. Notice that port hand buoys are always can-shaped and starboard hand buoys are always conical. If a buoy is lit, its light will be the same colour as the buoy. Frankly, it's total bananas, and it would be easy to blame the Yanks, but the truth of the matter is that they've been more consistent over the years than we have, as this dog-eared page from the Admiralty Navigation Manual of 1938 illustrates. Note that from the buoys in the top left-hand quadrant, back then in England and Scotland, starboard hand buoys were either red or black cones. If you're interested to read more about the history of IALA buoyage, there's a link in the Resources tab. The majority of the RYA world is in IALA A. The exception is the Neptune Islands, which are in Region B. For now, we're going to assume that we are in the IALA A region. Where there are differences, we'll point them out as we go along. Essentially, there are 6 different types of IALA navigational mark. We're going to examine each in turn. Lateral, red and green, buoys are used to mark channels. If you are entering the channel in the IALA A region, navigating in the direction of the incoming or flood tide, you should stay on the starboard side of the channel, close to the green buoys. Whereas if you are exiting the channel, navigating against the direction of the flood tide, you should stick close to the red buoys. On standard British Admiralty charts, red lateral buoys appear like this. This buoy is named Norris. The R just to the left of it tells us that it's red. The purple flash tells us that it is lit, and its light flashes red 3 times every 10 seconds. The buoy is obviously not drawn to scale, and the small circle at the base indicates its position. The direction of the purple flash has no significance. Green lateral buoys appear like this. This buoy is named South Ryde Middle. The G just underneath it tells us that it's green. The purple flash tells us that it's lit, and its light flashes green once every 5 seconds. Sometimes lateral marks are configured as pillar buoys. They have exactly the same meaning, but are used to make their light visible from a greater distance. Red pillar buoys have a cylindrical top mark. Green pillar buoys have a conical top mark. When lateral buoys are numbered, starboard hand buoys are odd, port hand buoys are even. Here we see a large-scale chart of the start of the main channel into Poole, Swash Channel. Bar buoy is also numbered 1, and its opposite number is the red port hand channel marker 2. Lateral buoys are not always laid in neat pairs. Take a close look at this chart of the Thorn Channel leading into Southampton Water. Posts might be used in narrow channels and harbours in lieu of buoys. They might or might not have top marks. If they do, port hand posts will have cylindrical top marks, starboard hand will have conical. Here are some good examples in the entrance to the River Hamble. Note the coronet symbol on top of the starboard hand posts, indicating that they are fitted with a radar reflector. Perches are very rarely seen these days. They used to be stuck in the mud in small rivers and creeks instead of conventional channel marks. Port hand ones are Y-shaped, starboard hand ones are like an arrow. You might think of the starboard hand ones as being conical. Small vessels can often navigate quite safely outside major shipping channels and should do so whenever large ships are using the channel. The main Swash Channel approaching Poole Harbour entrance is an excellent example. It is dredged to maintain a minimum depth of 7.5 metres. However, there is plenty of depth outside the port hand lateral markers for small craft. You will have noticed this symbol on the previous pages. It indicates the direction of buoyage. If you're entering a harbour or estuary, it's pretty obvious what the direction is. However, strictly speaking, buoyage is laid in the direction of the flood, incoming tide, and in some areas this is not readily discernible. Notice the two directions of buoyage symbols in the central Solent. In the eastern Solent, the red port hand buoys for the main shipping channel are laid along the island shore, whereas in the western Solent there are green starboard hand buoys on the island shore. You can see that if you are navigating from the western to eastern Solent, you're going to keep Gurnard Ledge green buoy to starboard. Then, after you've passed Cowes, you keep the next green buoy, South Ryde Middle, to port. Just north of Cowes there are two buoys, each with two upward pointing conical marks on top. These are cardinal marks, which we'll be covering later. They've been employed here to avoid any ambiguity for large vessels. Fixed structures connected to the shore, such as piers, jetties and breakwaters, are usually lit by two fixed lights, red or green as per the direction of buoyage, vertically, one above the other. Note F means fixed, whereas FL means flashing. This is Yarmouth Pier on the Isle of Wight. Whilst rarely seen these days, there are also preferred channel buoys. This one is a preferred channel to starboard buoy. It's mainly red and has a can-shaped top mark, so if you're using the main channel, treat it as a port mark. If, on the other hand, you wish to navigate the subsidiary channel to port, you could treat it as a starboard hand buoy. Perhaps this better illustrates their use. Here we need to turn to starboard to follow the main channel. The red, green, red buoy at the fork tells us preferred channel to starboard. Notice that it's mainly red and can-shaped. Whereas here we need to turn to port to follow the main channel. The green, red, green buoy at the fork tells us preferred channel to port. Notice that it's mainly green and conical. In the Ayala B region, of course, it's all different, and yes, it is confusing. I'll leave you to work out what's going on here. And here. When a preferred channel mark is lit, it will flash its primary colour 2 + 1 flashes in a given interval. This one in the River Hamble flashes 2 + 1 red every 10 seconds. The 2M signifies that it can be seen for 2 miles in good visibility. Sometimes the approach to a marked channel is marked by a safe water mark. Traditionally, they were spherical with red and white vertical stripes. The idea was that in the days before radar and GPS, and especially in poor visibility, you would navigate to the safe water mark, which is, as its name implies, surrounded by safe water, in order to know exactly where you were before locating the main marked channel. They are also sometimes known as fairway marks. There are several on your RYA training charts. Here's an excellent example on the approach to Port Fraser. Notice, by the way, the adjacent pilot boarding station and radio reporting point, which is pretty typical. Sometimes they're used to mark the centre of a channel, which crosses a sandbar between two major buoyed channels. This example, taken from the Thames estuary, shows Fowler's Gap, which allows small craft to cut across from Black Deep in the north to Knock Deep in the south. It is marked at its northern end by Long Sand Inner and at its southern end by Long Sand Outer. It follows that if you were navigating through Fowler's Gap in either direction, you would keep the two safe water buoys close on your port side. Major safe water buoys are constructed as pillar buoys to put their light as high as possible. Again, they have red and white vertical stripes, and they should have a red sphere on their top. Assuming they are lit, their light might be any one of a number of sequences. This one is isophase 5 seconds, which means that in each period of 5 seconds it will be on for 2.5 seconds and off for 2.5 seconds. Other common light sequences are one long flash every so many seconds, where a long flash is a flash of approximately 2 seconds, or the Morse code for A, which is one short flash and one long flash every so many seconds. Isolated dangers such as rocks, areas of shallow water, and other underwater obstructions might be marked with an isolated danger mark, coloured black, red, black. If it is lit, it will flash 2 flashes white within a given interval. This one is flashing twice every 5 seconds. Now we need to address the various patterns that lights might exhibit, and the abbreviations that describe them. A flashing light is one with short periods of light, longer periods of dark. This one is flashing once every 5 seconds. Note that when the light is white, the colour is not given. A quick flashing light flashes approximately once per second. A very quick flashing light flashes 80 to 159 flashes per minute, but normally either 100 or 120 flashes per minute. A very quick flashing light might be interrupted. A long flash is a flash of 2 seconds or more. This one is one long flash every 10 seconds. A light might be group flashing. This one is flashing green 3 times every 5 seconds. Make a note of the abbreviation. Brackets 3 tells you it's flashing 3 times. G tells you that it's green. The period is 5 seconds, which means groups of 3 commence every 5 seconds, and not that the interval between groups is 5 seconds. Composite group flashing is where a light flashes a pattern. For example, this one is flashing red 2 and 1 every 10 seconds. Short and long flashes might be mixed. Here we have very quick 6 followed by a long flash every 10 seconds. An isophase light is one that is on and off for equal periods. This one has a period of 6 seconds, so it's on for 3 and off for 3. An occulting light is one that's mainly on but goes off for short periods. This one is occulting red twice every 10 seconds. A light might signal a Morse code letter. This is U, for you are standing into danger. An alternating light is just that. This one is alternating white and red. And alternating occulting. Finally, there are fixed lights, but you never see one on its own because it could be confused with a navigation light. The most usual combination is 2 fixed lights, one above the other, which is commonly located on the end of a pier, breakwater, that sort of thing. Sometimes fixed lights will also flash. I know that sounds like an oxymoron, but it means a fixed light that shows short periods of higher intensity. There is a printable description of all light characteristics under the Resources tab. Cardinal marks were introduced in the 1970s and might be used to indicate that the deepest water is to one side of the mark, or to indicate the safe side on which to pass a danger, or to emphasize a feature in a channel, such as a bend, junction, branch, or the end of a shoal. They are an instruction to navigate north, east, south, or west of them according to their type and whether they're relevant to your safe navigation. For example, this south cardinal buoy has been laid south of Leap Spit to tell you that the deep water is to the south, and unless you have done a tidal height calculation to determine whether it's safe to navigate north of it, you should navigate to the south of it. Here, just north of Cowes, 2 northerly cardinal buoys, Gurnard and Prince Consort, mark the southern boundary of the central Solent precautionary area, where vessels less than 20 metres length overall must stay well clear of big ships. There is plenty of space to navigate south of them between the precautionary area and the Isle of Wight. At first, all cardinal buoys seem to look very much alike, as they're all black and yellow and have a white light. North cardinal marks are positioned to the north of the hazard or obstruction. They have 2 black cones on top, both pointing upwards. If you think of north as up, then you should be able to remember that both cones point up to north. They are black at the top and yellow at the bottom. Try to remember that the cones point to the black. East cardinal marks are positioned to the east of the hazard or obstruction. They have 2 black cones on top. The top one points up, the bottom one points down. Think of it as an Easter egg. They are coloured black, yellow, black from the top down. Remember, the cones point to the black. Think of it as an Easter egg sandwich. South cardinal marks are positioned to the south of the hazard or obstruction. They have two black cones on top, both pointing down. If you think of south as down, then you should be able to remember that both cones point down to the south. They are coloured yellow at the top, black at the bottom. Remember, the cones point to the black. West cardinal marks are positioned to the west of the hazard or obstruction. They have two black cones on top. The top one points down and the bottom one points up. Think of it as west. They are coloured yellow at the top, black in the middle and yellow at the bottom. Remember, the cones point to the black. Think of it as having a black belt around its waist. Of course, in reality, cardinal marks come in all shapes and sizes, and you must be able to recognize them by their colours, not just their top marks, which are not always present. Use binoculars if necessary. If cardinal buoys are lit, they all flash some pattern of white. The secret to remembering the pattern is to imagine them set against a clock face. Easterly cardinal marks are at 3 o'clock on the clock face. They flash some pattern of 3 flashes white. This one is flashing very quick, approximately 2 flashes per second, 3 times every 5 seconds. Southerly cardinal marks are at 6 o'clock on the clock face. They flash some pattern of 6 flashes and 1 long flash. This one is flashing very quick, 6 times, followed by 1 long flash every 10 seconds. Westerly cardinal marks are at 9 o'clock on the clock face. They flash some pattern of 9. This one is flashing very quick. Incidentally, the reason southerly marks flash 6 and 1 long flash is so that you can't confuse the lights of southerly and westerly cardinal buoys if they are temporarily obscured, perhaps by another vessel or waves. Northerly cardinal marks are at 12 o'clock on the clock face, so you might think they flash some pattern of 12. But they don't. They flash continuously. This one is flashing quick. Obviously, when we're approaching a cardinal mark, we need to take account of our course in order to determine whether to leave it on our port or starboard side. Here we are approaching a westerly cardinal from the north, on a southerly course, so we leave it to port. Whereas here we're approaching the buoy from the south, so we must alter course to port in order to leave it on our starboard side. The temporary wrecking marker buoy is a comparative newcomer amongst Ayala buoys. As its name implies, it is used to mark a recent wreck, which will either be subsequently salvaged or will later be marked more permanently by either an isolated danger buoy or a number of cardinal buoys. It has blue and yellow vertical stripes with a yellow crucifix top mark, and, if it's lit, flashes alternating blue and yellow, 1 second flashes with an interval of 0.5 seconds. Yellow buoys, usually with an X top mark, are used for a variety of purposes. They might, for example, delineate a no anchoring area or water skiing area, or they might be used as race marks. If they are lit, they will usually show a yellow light flashing a sequence which cannot be confused with any white flashing lights in the vicinity. There are numerous spherical yellow, or sometimes orange, race marks in the Solent. They are all now, supposed to be, lit. However, their yellow lights, which generally flash once every 4 seconds, are very weak and inconspicuous. It's very easy to hit one in the dark if you're not navigating carefully, and they can inflict serious damage. Most, but not all, are seasonal, being laid in March or April and taken up in October or November. There are many mooring buoys in harbours and estuaries. Many are unlit. They should be marked on the very largest scale chart of the area. Some are designed for big ships and are quite capable of inflicting serious damage. Sadly, a number of years ago, a young man was killed returning home from Cowes to Southampton alone in a rib when he collided at high speed with an unlit mooring buoy just like this one. Many major headlands, hazards such as rocks and reefs, and landfalls are marked by lighthouses. Sadly, in this GPS age, many are no longer operational. Here's a good example right on the end of the Needles. You can see that its position is marked by a 5-pointed star. It's what is known as a sectored light. In other words, it appears as different colours depending upon where you are viewing it from. These are difficult to see on some charts, so we've enhanced the sector lines. Click on to see them, click off to make them disappear. It is occulting. 2 periods off every 20 seconds, red, white or green depending on the sector. The light is 24 meters above mean high water springs. We'll talk about light ranges later, but for now it depends on the colour, varying from 17 miles down to 13 miles. Because of how our eyesight works, unless you are colourblind, you can see white lights from the greatest distance, then green, then red. Here you can see how the sectors relate to the main Needles channel in and out of the Solent. Also the safe white sector approach. Incidentally, occulting lights with long periods can appear fixed if you take your eyes off them for even a moment. Keep watching. The Needles light occults twice every 20 seconds. Here's another example. We are navigating into a narrow channel. If we are too far to port, the light will show red. If we are too far to starboard, the light will show green. If we are in the channel, clear of all obstructions to port and starboard, the light will show white. Here we are too far to starboard and need to alter course to port. Now we're too far to port and need to alter course to starboard. Finally, we're on track. Sometimes the deep water channel into and out of a harbour or estuary will be marked by a transit. Here's the one guiding you into Newtown Creek on the Isle of Wight. From the outer end of the transit you would steer approximately 130 degrees true, keeping a red and white post with a Y on the top in line with a red post with a cylinder on the top. Here a transit is marked by 2 white posts. We are currently too far to port and need to alter course to starboard in order to bring ourselves back onto the transit. Now we're too far to starboard and need to turn to port. Too far to port. Too far to starboard. On transit. It comes as a bit of a shock to some people that, even in very busy areas, not all obstructions, both natural, such as sandbars and rocks, and man-made, such as this tide gauge in the central Solent, are buoyed or lit. See if you can spot this quite substantial unlit structure on the large-scale chart. And, given sufficient height of tide, if you attempted to cut the corner on Cowshot Spit in order to stay out of the precautionary area, you would have needed to examine your chart with extreme care to avoid hitting this unlit structure at night. Large offshore structures such as oil and gas exploration or production platforms generally show a light signalling the Morse for U, ... which is the International Code of Signals signal for you are standing into danger. The next thing to think about is how far you can see a navigational mark from. We'll consider lit marks first. The range written alongside the light is its nominal range. That is, how far it can be seen from in good visibility, which in meteorological terms means visibility of 10 miles. The light on Point Victoria has a nominal range of 23 miles. Don't worry, I can see your confused look from here. You're probably thinking, how can a light's nominal range ever be more than 10 miles then? The answer to this riddle is to understand that whereas you might not be able to see the physical structure of the lighthouse through slight haze at 10.1 miles, you'll still be able to see its light because visibility refers to the ability to see something under natural light, and the light will be many times brighter than natural light. The maximum distance from which a light of known height can be seen, allowing for the Earth's curvature, is known as its geographical range. It can be determined from tables of rising and dipping distances, given in an almanac or calculated using this formula. There's a table inside the back cover of your RYA training almanac. To do this accurately, we have to calculate the height of a light above sea level, allowing for height of tide, HOT. For example, if the charted height of the light were 24 meters above MHWS, the HOT were 2 meters, and MHWS is 2.5 meters, then if you're using the table from an almanac, you have to interpolate between values. So, with the light 24.5 meters above sea level and a height of I of, for example, 2 meters, you would see the light from approximately 13.2 miles. The formula would obviously also give 13.2 miles. Of course, all of this is only approximate, because you might be going up and down with the waves, and the height of tide where you are won't be exactly the same as at the light. If it's cloudy, you can often see the light reflected off the clouds, well before you see the light itself. This is called the loom of the light. For major lighthouses, it appears to sweep across the sky. So much for lit marks. What about in daytime? For example, how far might you expect to be able to see a major navigational mark from? Well, it's very hard to say. Of course, the Earth's curvature plays a role, but you can't just use the same formula based on the height of the mark and height of I. For example, if you were on the flybridge of a motor yacht with a height of I of 4 meters above sea level, the formula would tell you that you might see a mark reaching 3 meters above sea level at 7.75 miles. But, of course, that's the point where the very top of the mark would rise above the horizon, and it won't be fully visible until you were approximately 4 miles away, which is the visible horizon for a height of I of 4 meters. So, in practice, you might see it with a good pair of binoculars at around 5 miles. And anyway, charts more often than not don't have the height of floating marks.
And with fixed structures like West Pole Beacon outside Chichester Harbour, where the mean spring range is 4 metres and the light is 14 metres above mean high water springs, sometimes it'll be 18 metres or more above sea level, and at others less than 14 metres.
At night you have little or no depth perception, so it can all get very confusing. You need to navigate carefully. Don't just steer from one light to the next. Beware! If you take your Yachtmaster practical exam in the Solent, examiners are very keen on getting you to execute a night pilotage into Beaulieu River, where only some of the posts are lit, and many's the unfortunate candidate who's run aground or, worse still, ploughed straight into an unlit post, neither of which are likely to lead to a pass. Sometimes a buoy, lighthouse, lightship, or offshore structure might be equipped with a special type of radar reflector, known as a raycon, denoted by a purple circle around the buoy and the word raycon. This stands for radar beacon. The one in the central Solent signals the Morse for T, which is 1 dash. Some electronic charts show buoys in glorious technicolor. Their meaning is pretty obvious, but each publisher uses its own symbols. Here's an example from a Navionics chart. Some even show the lights flashing, also giving a 3D perspective. If you're interested to see an example, refer to the Resources tab. ECDIS charts use a different set of symbols that comply with the IMO regulations. As you can see, whilst they are fairly logical, they're not quite as intuitive to interpret as those shown on the previous slide. Admiralty lists of lights and fog signals provide a full list of lights per geographic region. Depending upon the source, they might be organised in sequence along a coastline or by region, for example a harbour or estuary, and might disregard lights or buoys of less than a minimum height or luminous range. For each light, the list gives reference number, name and location, position, characteristics, height, range nominal, structure, and remarks. UKHO Admiralty lists of lights are available in paper form as 14 regional volumes at £31.10 each, in digital form as an annual licence at £62.60 for each of 9 areas, or £562.50 for worldwide coverage. They are updated online via Admiralty Notices to Mariners. Light lists can also be found in yachtsmen's almanacs, such as Reed's, although the level of detail is significantly less than given in official hydrographic office publications. The list given in the RYA Training Almanac is not a good example. Always remember, unless your charts are bang up to date according to UKHO Notices to Mariners and local Notices to Mariners, buoys and lights might have been changed, moved, or removed. Even then, buoys might have been very recently dragged, wrecked, or damaged, and lights might be out of order. And you should always consult the chart to determine the significance of a buoy to your safe navigation before determining which side to leave it. Now try this final quiz. That's pretty much it for visual aids to navigation. There's an excellent paper on the subject under the Resources tab if you're keen to learn more. Otherwise, please go on to attempt exercise J.